When the lights in the meeting room suddenly went out, everyone turned to look at the lone figure sitting at the back. No one knew who he was, but everyone believed that with just the lift of a finger, the entire audience would collapse. In a world where the underworld never sleeps, there exists a man who walks the line between reverence and terror, and he is the only one who remains silent, sitting quietly in the corner of the room. They say, if you don't know who the most dangerous person in the room is, then it's him. And the man in the black coat, sitting in the last position, was living proof of that saying. The year was 2284, deep in the post-geological era, when humanity had recovered and rebuilt society after the great polar cataclysm. Abyssus, an underwater city constructed deep beneath the ocean to avoid weather disasters, was divided into multiple levels, each housing different social classes. The deeper the level, the poorer the inhabitants. Jonah Kane, known in whispers as the Shade, had spent most of his life keeping his identity hidden, observing and gathering information. He was the only known survivor possessing the molecular shifter gene from pre-catastrophe times, a genetic anomaly that allowed him to completely conceal himself in darkness. His origins remained a mystery. Rumors suggested he was the offspring of a bioengineer and an underground soldier, but no one knew for certain. Abyssus was drowning in corruption. The underground syndicate known as the Ocean Lords controlled the lower levels, trafficking in weapons and forbidden technology. The block councils governed each level. The wealthiest resided on level 1, with poverty increasing as the levels descended. Jonah had built a life of solitude and obscurity on level 8, living among the desperate and forgotten. He had grown accustomed to blending into shadows, observing the world through the eyes of a ghost. It was safer that way for a man with his abilities. Attention meant danger. In his sparse living quarters on level 8, Jonah sat motionless, listening to a message from one of his few informants. The holographic display flickered, casting eerie blue shadows across his angular face. Secret meeting, level 5, cell block 347. Tomorrow night, the distorted voice whispered. All 3 Ocean Lords will be there. And Kane. They're auctioning something called Aqua Vitae. Word is, it's not what they claim. It's worse. Jonah's expression remained unchanged, but a subtle tension crept into his shoulders. The Ocean Lords never gathered in person unless something monumental was at stake. Specifics? Jonah's voice was low, barely above a whisper, the voice of a man unaccustomed to being heard. Officially, a compound that can permanently cure rare diseases and sustain underwater life. Unofficially, a bioweapon that can control the will of its users. If it falls into the wrong hands, it will plunge Abyssus into chaos. They're calling the buyers now. The message ended, leaving Jonah in darkness. His mind raced through the implications. If the information was accurate, this Aqua Vitae could become the ultimate tool for whoever controlled it, capable of turning citizens into mindless puppets, creating an army of the willing at the behest of whoever administered the compound. For years, Jonah had remained in the shadows, watching as Abyssus deteriorated under corruption. He'd survived by avoiding attention, keeping his unique abilities hidden. The molecular shifter gene was thought to be extincta, relic of pre-catastrophe genetic experimentation. If anyone discovered what he was, he'd become either a target or a commodity. But this was different. This threat extended beyond the daily corruption and violence that had become Abyssus's normal state. If Aqua Vitae was what his source claimed, it would mean the end of free will in the city. For the first time in years, Jonah considered stepping into the light. The next evening, Jonah moved silently through the lower service tunnels of level 5. The molecular shifter gene allowed him to blend with shadows, becoming nearly invisible in darkness. It wasn't true invisibility, more like perfect camouflage, a biological ability to manipulate how light reflected off his body. The secret gathering was being held in a converted maintenance hub-neutral territory for the Ocean Lords. As Jonah approached, he noted the security, armed guards at every entrance, scanning devices, and at least 2 electromagnetic pulse generators to disable unauthorized tech. Getting in undetected would be challenging, but not impossible. He'd need to time his movements perfectly with the security sweep patterns. Jonah waited until the guards rotated positions, then moved through the maintenance shaft, his body melting into the darkness as he activated his molecular shifting ability. He felt the familiar tingle across his skin as his cells aligned to absorb and redirect light. To any observer, he was just another shadow in a place full of them. The meeting hall was arranged like an amphitheater, with 3 elevated platforms for the Ocean Lords and their closest lieutenants. Below them, representatives from various factions sat in concentric circles. Jonah recognized faces from the Underwatch, Abyssus's corrupt police force, officials from Level 1, and several scientists who had gone missing from the public registry years ago. Slipping along the wall, Jonah found a seat in the back corner, far from the main lighting. He deactivated his shifting ability. Maintaining it for too long would drain him, and kept his head low. In a room full of dangerous people focused on the center stage, a quiet figure at the back was practically invisible, even without special abilities. The room fell silent as 3 figures took their positions on the elevated platforms. The Ocean Lords, rulers of Abyssus's underworld, each commanded a different syndicate. To the left stood Marius Blackwell of the Ethereal Syndicate, his face half covered with cybernetic implants that glowed with a faint blue light. In the center was Diana Koval of the Abyssal Cartel, the only woman among them, known for her ruthless tactics and strategic brilliance. On the right platform stood Lauren Ebern of the Leviathan Collective, his massive frame covered in bioluminescent tattoos that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. Behind Marius, partially obscured in shadow, stood a slender figure that made Jonah's blood run cold. Silas Crow, known as the Scythe, was the Ethereal Syndicate's top assassin. Rumors claimed he could manipulate darkness itself to kill his targets. Jonah knew better. Crow was exceptionally trained, enhanced with black market tech that gave him advantages in darkness. But he wasn't supernatural. Still, he was dangerous. Perhaps the most lethal person in the room. Or second most lethal, Jonah thought wryly. "We gather to discuss a matter of unprecedented importance," Diana Koval began, her voice carrying effortlessly through the chamber. "After years of research, our scientists have perfected Aqua Vitea biochemical compound that will change life in Abyssus forever." A holographic display appeared in the center of the room, showing a swirling blue liquid in a containment cylinder. "Aqua Vitae represents the pinnacle of genetic and neurological engineering," she continued. "Once administered, it permanently enhances cellular regeneration, prevents tissue damage from deep-sea pressure, and extends human lifespan by an estimated 40%. Murmurs rippled through the audience. If true, such a compound would be worth fortunes, especially to the wealthy residents of Level 1, who already spent vast sums on life extension technologies. "The bidding will begin at 5 million credits, Lauren Ebern announced, his deep voice resonating throughout the chamber. But first, a demonstration. A side door opened, and guards brought in a man wearing the tattered clothes of Level 9. He looked malnourished and terrified, eyes darting frantically around the room. Diana gestured, and a scientist approached with a syringe containing the blue liquid. The man struggled as they held him down, but fell still immediately after the injection. Within seconds, his posture straightened, and his expression became blank. "Stand," Diana commanded. The man stood. "Turn in a circle." He turned precisely. "Tell us how you feel." "I feel perfect," the man replied in a monotone voice, eyes vacant. "I will serve Abyssus. I will serve the leadership. I am yours to command." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't cellular regeneration or life extension. This was mind control. From his position at the back, Jonah fought to keep his expression neutral. His source had been right. Aquavitae was a neural control agent, disguised as a medical breakthrough. In the hands of the Ocean Lords or corrupt Level 1 officials, it would mean absolute power over anyone they chose to treat. As you can see, Diana continued smoothly, Aquavitae creates perfect compliance. Imagine your security forces never questioning orders. Imagine workers who never tire, never complain. Imagine a population that accepts their place in the hierarchy of abysses. Jonah scanned the room, noting the reactions. Some looked horrified, but most especially, the Level 1 representatives showed eager interest. He activated a small recording device embedded in his jacket cuff, capturing every word. "The bidding begins now," Marius announced. "Do I hear 6 million?" The auction proceeded rapidly, with representatives from different factions raising the price. Judge Coral Vega, acting on behalf of Level 1, was particularly aggressive, eventually offering 20 million credits. The Underwatch commander matched her bid. Then Lauren Ebern himself entered the bidding on behalf of Leviathan Collective. As the amounts climbed, Jonah noticed movement at the edge of the room. A figure in a reflective mask slipped between the columns, someone who clearly wasn't supposed to be there. The mask's surface changed constantly, reflecting its surroundings to provide camouflage, almost as effective as Jonah's abilities. He recognized the technology, high-end optical camouflage mask, rare and expensive. Only one person in the lower levels had access to such equipment: Arya, Echo Nix, the notorious hacker from Level 8. What was she doing here? Jonah wondered if she was working for one of the syndicates or pursuing her own agenda. Either way, her presence complicated things. If she was discovered, the resulting chaos might jeopardize his own mission. The bidding had reached 50 million credits when the lights suddenly flickered. A murmur of concern spread through the assembly. In an underwater city, power disruptions could be deadly. The Ocean Lords looked to their security teams, who began checking communication devices. Jonah used the distraction to activate his molecular shifter gene, disappearing into the shadows as he moved toward the secure room where the actual Aquavitae sample would be stored. Security would focus on protecting the Ocean Lords, giving him a narrow window of opportunity. As he slipped through a service corridor, he caught a glimpse of Arya's reflective mask disappearing around a corner. She was heading in the same direction. Interesting, he thought. Perhaps she wasn't here for the auction at all, but for the same reason he was the compound itself. Jonah followed, maintaining a safe distance. If she triggered any alarms, he'd need time to retreat. The corridor led to a reinforced door with a biometric security panel. Arya was working on bypassing it, her fingers moving deftly across a portable hacking device. She was better than good. The security system should have been impenetrable, but within minutes, the door slid open with barely a sound. She slipped inside, unaware of Jonah's presence behind her. The secure room was small and clinical, dominated by a central pedestal where a single vial of Aquavitae glowed with an eerie blue light. Various instruments surrounded it, monitoring temperature, pressure, and radiation levels. Arya moved toward the pedestal, but froze as a voice came from the shadows. "I wouldn't touch that if I were you." Silas Crow stepped into view, a predatory smile on his face. "Echo, isn't it? Interesting friends you're working for. Or did you think you could sell this yourself?" Arya's hand moved to her side, where Jonah suspected she kept a weapon. "The Ocean Lords know about your little hack into the security system," Crow continued. "Rather sloppy for someone with your reputation, almost as if you wanted to be caught." "Maybe I did," Arya replied, her voice distorted by her mask. "Sometimes the best way in is through the front door." "And sometimes," Crow said, drawing a thin black blade from his sleeve, "the only way out is in a body bag." He lunged forward with inhuman speed, the result of black market reflex enhancers. Arya dodged, but barely. The blade caught her arm, tearing through her jacket. Jonah had a split-second decision to make. Remaining hidden was the safest option. But Crow would kill Arya, and she might be the only other person in Abyssus who understood the true danger of Aquavitae. With a silent curse at his own foolishness, Jonah released his hold on the shadows and materialized behind Crow. He grabbed a metal pipe from the wall and swung it hard, catching the assassin across the back of the knees. Crow stumbled but recovered with terrifying speed, whirling to face this new threat. His eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed in calculation. "The ghost of level 8, he said softly. "So the rumors are true. The Shade lives." "Run," Jonah told Arya, not taking his eyes off Crow. "Take what you need and go." She hesitated only briefly before darting to the pedestal and extracting a data chip from the monitoring equipment. She also took a small sample of the compound, storing it in a specialized container from her belt. Crow attacked again. This blade aimed at Jonah's throat. Jonah parried with the pipe, the impact sending jarring pain up his arm. The assassin was enhanced, stronger, and faster than a normal human. The lights flickered again, and Jonah used the momentary darkness to activate his molecular shifter gene. He disappeared from Crow's view, shifting position silently. Crow's enhanced senses detected movement, and he slashed at the air where Jonah had relocated. The blade missed by millimeters. "Impressive trick," Crow said, his voice eerily calm. "But darkness is my domain." He reached for a device on his belt, and suddenly, the room was plunged into complete darkness. Emergency lights tried to activate but died immediately. Crow had used an EMP device specifically designed to disable lights. Now they were both in their element. Crow, trained to kill in darkness, and Jonah, able to become one with it. In the pitch black, they fought. Jonah's pipe met Crow's blade again and again, the metallic clang echoing through the small room. Each time the emergency lights tried to reboot, providing brief flashes of illumination. Jonah used those split seconds to reposition himself, staying just ahead of Crow's attacks. Arya had disappeared, presumably escaped with the data and sample. Good, Jonah thought. At least something might come of this suicide mission. Crow was relentless, his blade finding Jonah's shoulder, drawing blood. Jonah retaliated by slamming the pipe into Crow's ribs, feeling something crack under the impact. The assassin grunted in pain but didn't slow. "Who are you working for?" he demanded. "Level 1? The Resistance?" Jonah didn't waste breath on a response. Let Crow wonder. Let the Ocean Lords wonder. If he survived, that uncertainty might provide some protection. A larger explosion rocked the facility, followed by the wail of alarm sirens. Someone, probably Arya, had created a diversion. "This isn't over," Crow promised, backing toward a secondary exit. "I'll find you, Shade, both of you." When the emergency systems finally reactivated, flooding the room with red light, Jonah was alone with the pedestal. The vial of Aquavitae remained, but the monitoring data was gone, along with a sample. Time to disappear, he thought. The Ocean Lords would lock down the entire level once they realized what had happened. Jonah activated his molecular shifter gene once more, vanishing into the shadows. He moved through the now chaotic facility, past guards rushing to respond to the explosion, through ventilation ducts and maintenance corridors. He made his way back to the lower levels of Abyssus, nursing his wounded shoulder and wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. After several hours of careful navigation through the labyrinthine passages connecting Abyssus's levels, Jonah finally reached level 8. His shoulder throbbed where Crow's blade had cut him, but the wound wasn't deep enough to require medical attention. Fortunate, since visiting a medical facility would create records he couldn't afford. He made his way to his sparse quarters, hidden within the forgotten maintenance sections of level 8. The space was little more than a converted storage room, but it had power, clean water, and most importantly, security systems of his own design. Once inside, Jonah collapsed onto his narrow bed, exhaustion catching up with him. The molecular shifting drained his energy reserves, especially when maintained for extended periods. Combined with the fight against Crow, he was operating on fumes. But rest would have to wait. He needed to analyze what he'd learned about Aquavitae and determine his next move. And there was the matter of Aria Echo Nix. She had the data and a sample, which made her either a potential ally or a dangerous complication. As if summoned by his thoughts, a soft chime indicated someone had triggered the outer perimeter of his security system. Jonah pulled himself upright, checking the monitor. The camera showed a figure in a reflective mask standing at the hidden entrance to his sanctuary. Arya had found him. The question was how. Warily, Jonah activated the communication system. "You're either very good or very foolish." "Both, usually," came the distorted reply. "We need to talk, Shade, about what we both saw tonight." Jonah considered his options. Sending her away was safest, but she had information he needed. And if she'd found his hiding place once, she could do it again, perhaps next time bringing others. "Any weapons, leave them outside," he instructed, "and I'll know if you're lying." After a moment, Arya placed several devices on the ground: a pulse pistol, 2 knives, and what appeared to be a miniature EMP generator. Jonah remotely scanned for additional weapons or tracking devices, then reluctantly unlocked the entrance. Arya stepped inside, her reflective mask shifting patterns in the dim light. She took in the sparse quarters with a quick glance, then focused on Jonah. "You're bleeding," she observed. "Crow's faster than he looks," Jonah replied. "Why are you here?" Arya reached up and removed her mask, revealing a young woman with sharp features and eyes that seemed to calculate everything they saw. A network of fine scars traced patterns across her left temple, evidence of neural implants. Likely custom black market tech. "Because Aquavitae isn't just mind control," she said. "It's genocide waiting to happen." She placed a data chip on the table between them. "I extracted this from their research database. It contains everything: formulation, testing protocols, subject responses. They've been experimenting on people from level 9 for months." Jonah inserted the chip into his secure terminal. Holographic displays sprang to life, showing molecular structures, neural pathway diagrams, and test subject data. The information was comprehensive and damning. 80% mortality rate in initial trials, he read aloud. Subjects who survive initial administration experience complete neural compliance, but systemic organ failure within 30-45 days. "It gets worse," Arya said, pointing to another section of data. "The compound is transmissible through bodily fluids for approximately 72 hours after administration. They're designing it to spread." Jonah's mind raced through the implications. A controlled outbreak. They could start with targeted individuals, then let it spread naturally through certain levels of the city, while keeping the upper levels isolated and protected, Arya finished. "Perfect obedience from the working class until they die. Then replace them with the next batch." "Why are you showing me this?" Jonah asked, studying her carefully. "You could sell this information to the highest bidder. There are plenty who would pay handsomely to be on the right side of this plan." Arya's expression hardened. "I grew up on level 9. My family, what's left of them, still lives there. They would be the first to die in this scheme." Her motivation made sense, but Jonah had survived by questioning everything. "How did you find me?" A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "You're not the only one with special talents. I've been tracking unusual power consumption patterns in abandoned sections for months. You're careful, but even ghosts leave footprints if you know where to look. And why would a renowned hacker spend months looking for an urban legend?" "Because I needed to be sure you existed before tonight," she replied. "The Ocean Lords have been developing Aquavitae for years. I've been gathering information, but I couldn't act alone. I needed someone who could move unseen, someone with nothing to lose." What makes you think I have nothing to lose? A man who lives in shadows has already lost everything except his life, Arya said simply. And tonight, you risked even that to help a stranger, which means you understand what's at stake. Jonah couldn't argue with her assessment. What's your plan? This data is damning, but the Ocean Lords control everything below level 3, and the level 1 officials are clearly involved in the bidding. Who exactly are we supposed to take this to? The Ethics Tribunal, Arya replied. It's the only governing body with enough independence and authority. If we can present this evidence directly to them, not even Judge Vega could suppress it. Jonah laughed bitterly. The Ethics Tribunal. You might as well suggest we deliver it to the mythical surface world. The tribunal is on level 1, behind more security than the Ocean Lords themselves. And Judge Vega is already implicated. She was at the auction. I know it's not simple, Arya conceded. But the tribunal's proceedings are public by law. If we can get this evidence before them while the city is watching, not even Vega could prevent the truth from spreading. And your plan for accomplishing this miracle? I have access codes for the maintenance systems connecting the levels. We can bypass most of the standard security checkpoints. With your ability to move unseen and my technical skills, we have a chance. Jonah studied the data again, focusing on the mortality projections. If Aqua Vitae was deployed as designed, thousands would die, primarily from the lower levels, where he had spent his life hiding. People who, like him, had survived by remaining invisible to those in power. For years, he'd told himself that staying hidden was the only way to survive. That observation, not intervention, was his path. But if he turned away now, could he still call himself a survivor? Or would he just be another accomplice to mass murder? If we do this, he said finally, we'll need more than access codes. We'll need irrefutable proof that can't be erased or discredited, and a way to broadcast it if we can't reach the tribunal. Arya nodded. I can handle the broadcast contingency. As for proof, she reached into her jacket and produced a small container holding a sample of the glowing blue liquid. I took more than just data. Jonah's eyes widened. Do you have any idea how dangerous that is? If it breaks, it won't, she assured him. Triple-sealed containment, designed for hazardous materials transport. But yes, I'm aware of the risk. Jonah weighed their options. The journey from level 8 to level 1 would be perilous under normal circumstances. With both the Ocean Lords and level 1 security hunting them, it verged on suicidal. Yet the alternative was to do nothing and watch as Abyssus's corrupt leadership decimated the population through mind control and planned obsolescence. We leave in 6 hours, he decided. I need to recover, and you need to gather whatever equipment will help us reach level 1. Don't return here. We'll meet at Junction 42 on level 7. If you're not alone, or if you're compromised, I won't be there. Arya replaced her mask, its surface rippling as it adjusted to the room's lighting. 6 hours. Junction 42. She moved toward the exit, then paused. Thank you for helping at the facility. You didn't have to. Don't thank me yet, Jonah replied grimly. We still have to survive the journey up. After Arya left, Jonah treated his wounded shoulder and began preparations. He had survived for years by staying invisible, avoiding conflict, never taking sides in Abyssus's power struggles. Now, he was about to challenge the city's most powerful figures directly. If they succeeded, the corrupt leadership would face justice, and thousands of lives would be saved. If they failed, Jonah would lose the anonymity that had protected him all these years, and likely his life as well. As he packed essential supplies and weapons, Jonah reflected on the irony. The man who had built his existence around not being seen was about to make himself the most visible target in Abyssus. 6 hours later, Jonah arrived at Junction 42, a forgotten maintenance hub on level 7 where water pipes and power conduits intersected. The place was perpetually damp, with condensation dripping from overhead pipes and pooling on the metal floor grates. Few people came here, which made it perfect for a clandestine meeting. Jonah had arrived early, using his molecular shifter ability to blend with the shadows as he checked for surveillance or traps. Finding none, he waited, conserving his energy for the challenges ahead. Precisely on time, Arya appeared. She wore the same reflective mask, but had changed into a utilitarian outfit better suited for their journey, reinforced fabrics with multiple pockets and attachment points for equipment. Jonah emerged partially from the shadows, letting her see him while maintaining enough molecular shifting to disappear instantly if necessary. "You came alone," he observed. "As promised," she replied, her voice still distorted by the mask. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "Trust is a luxury in Abyssus. I prefer verification." Arya nodded, understanding the caution. "I've mapped our route through the maintenance systems. We can avoid most security checkpoints until level 3. After that, we'll need these." She produced 2 identification chips, the kind used by maintenance workers to access restricted areas. They're programmed with mid-level clearance, not enough to get us all the way to level 1. But they'll get us through standard checkpoints without raising alarms. "And when we reach level 3? "That's where it gets complicated," Arya admitted. "The transition between levels 3 and 2 is heavily monitored. Everyone passing through undergoes biometric scanning, which would immediately flag both of us," Jonah noted. His modified genetics would trigger every alarm in the system, and Arya was undoubtedly in multiple security databases as a person of interest. "Yes, but there's an alternative route. The flooded shafts." Jonah frowned. The flooded shafts were emergency drainage conduits designed to prevent catastrophic flooding if Abyssus's outer hull was breached. They were rarely used and minimally monitored. But for good reason, they periodically flooded with seawater as pressure systems were tested. "Timing would be critical," he said. "If the flood protocols activate while we're inside, I've hacked their maintenance schedule. The next test cycle isn't for 48 hours. We should have a clear passage." "Should have," Jonah repeated skeptically. "Nothing in this plan comes with guarantees," Arya pointed out. "But it's our best option for bypassing the biometric scanners." She was right, though Jonah was reluctant to admit it. The flooded shafts represented their best chance of reaching level 2 undetected. From there, they would still need to find a way to access level 1 and reach the ethics tribunal. But one impossible problem at a time. "What about the sample?" he asked. "The flooded shafts will be high pressure, if the containment fails." "It won't," Arya assured him. "But, as a precaution, I've separated the sample into 3 reinforced containers. Each is independently secure, and will each carry 1. The third is hidden at a drop point on level 4. Even if we lose 2, we'll have backup." Jonah nodded, impressed despite himself. Arya had thought through the contingencies carefully. "Let's move," he said, activating his molecular shifter gene to a low level, not enough to disappear completely, but sufficient to blur his outline in the dim lighting. "The longer we wait, the more time they have to find us." They moved through the maintenance corridors of level 7, Jonah leading the way through the less traveled paths he'd mapped over years of solitary exploration. Arya followed closely, occasionally consulting a holographic map projected from her wrist device. At one junction, Jonah raised a hand for silence. Voices echoed from around the corner, maintenance workers or security. He couldn't tell which. He pulled Arya into a recessed alcove, activating his molecular shifting to conceal them both partially in shadow. 2 Underwatch officers passed by, their conversation becoming clearer. "A complete lockdown of levels 5 through 9, one was saying. "Someone stole research data from the Ocean Lords. High priority target." "Any description?" the second officer asked. 2 suspects. A woman using some kind of reflective camouflage technology, and a man who supposedly can disappear into shadows. Sounds like superstitious nonsense to me." The woman could be that hacker. Echo. She's been a thorn in Underwatch's side for years. Doesn't matter who they are. The bounty's 5 million credits. Dead or alive. The officers continued past, unaware of the targets hiding mere meters away. They're hunting us already, Arya whispered once the officers were gone. Did you expect anything less? We stole from the Ocean Lords and Judge Vega in one night. They'll use every resource to find us. It just means we need to move faster, she replied. The route to level 6 is through this service elevator. It's only used for waste management, so security is minimal. The elevator was ancient and corroded, clearly predating the Great Polar Cataclysm. It creaked alarmingly as it carried them upward to level 6, where the air grew noticeably cleaner, evidence of the better filtration systems allocated to the higher levels. Level 6 presented their first significant challenge. To reach level 5, they needed to cross a central hub where security cameras monitored all passage. Arya connected her wrist device to a maintenance panel, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. I can loop the camera feed for approximately 30 seconds, she explained. After that, the system will automatically detect the manipulation. 30 seconds to cross 50 meters of exposed corridor, Jonah calculated. Doable, but tight. On my mark, Arya said, making final adjustments. 3, 2, 1, now. They sprinted across the open space, keeping low to avoid any manual observation. Jonah could have used his molecular shifting to cross unseen, but maintaining it while running at full speed would drain him too quickly, and they had a long journey ahead. 25 seconds later, they reached the access door to the maintenance tunnel leading upward. Arya pressed her stolen identification chip against the scanner, waiting anxiously as the system processed it. With 3 seconds to spare, the door slid open, and they slipped through just as the camera system reset. That was too close, Jonah muttered as they caught their breath in the relative safety of the maintenance tunnel. It won't get easier, Arya replied. Level 5 is Ocean Lord territory. Their security systems are more advanced than the standard Abyssus protocols. Then we avoid their systems entirely. Jonah decided. There's another way through Level 5, the old water recycling plant. It was decommissioned years ago when they upgraded the filtration systems, but the access tunnels still connect to Level 4. Arya looked skeptical. Why wouldn't the Ocean Lords monitor those tunnels? Because they're partially flooded with stagnant water and infested with tunnel rats the size of small dogs, Jonah explained with grim satisfaction. Not even the most dedicated security teams bother with them. Rats, Arya repeated flatly. Wonderful. They're mostly harmless unless cornered, and they'll be more afraid of us than we are of them. Speak for yourself, she muttered, but followed as Jonah led them through a series of increasingly narrow and damp corridors. The abandoned water recycling plant was as uninviting as Jonah had described. Murky water covered the floor to a depth of about 20 centimeters, and the air was thick with the smell of mold and decay. Their footsteps splashed loudly in the silence, despite their attempts at stealth. A skittering sound came from the darkness ahead, followed by multiple sets of glowing eyes, reflecting their helmet lights. The tunnel rats watched warily before disappearing into drainage pipes and crevices. Told you, Jonah said. They want nothing to do with us. They waded through the fetid water, careful to avoid deeper sections where the floor had collapsed. After nearly an hour of slow progress, they reached a vertical shaft with a maintenance ladder leading upward. Level 4, Jonah announced, pointing up the shaft. From here, we can access the central distribution hub and retrieve your third sample. They climbed the ladder, emerging into a significantly cleaner and better maintained area. Level 4 housed Abyssus's resource distribution systems, water, power, and air all flowed through massive conduits, monitored by automated systems. Arya led them to a secluded corner where environmental monitoring equipment was stored. She removed a ceiling panel and retrieved a small container, identical to the ones they already carried. 3 samples secured, she confirmed, Now comes the hard part. The flooded shafts. Jonah nodded. Where's the access point? Northern Quadrant. Maintenance Section 12. It's a service entry for pressure regulation technicians. They moved carefully through Level 4, using Arya's stolen identification chip to pass through security doors. The level was more heavily staffed than the lower levels, with technicians and engineers maintaining the critical systems that kept Abyssus functioning. Twice they had to hide as security patrols passed. Evidence of the heightened alert status throughout the city. News of their theft had clearly spread rapidly through official channels. Finally, they reached Maintenance Section 12, a cavernous space filled with enormous pressure regulation valves. The ceiling stretched upward at least 30 meters, accommodating the massive machinery. At the far end was a reinforced door marked Danger, Flood Control Access, Authorized Personnel Only. That's our way up, Arya said, approaching the control panel beside the door. This will be tricky. The access codes change daily, and the door is monitored from central security. Can you bypass it? Yes, but it will trigger an alert. They'll know someone accessed the flooded shafts. Jonah considered their options. How long before a response team arrives? Standard protocol is 8 minutes for a non-emergency alert. Then, we'll need to be well inside the shafts before they arrive. Once we're in, can you seal the door behind us? Arya nodded. I can lock it into a safety protocol state. They'll need override codes from Level 2 security to open it again. Do it. Arya connected her device to the control panel, her fingers moving rapidly across the holographic interface. Lines of code scrolled by faster than Jonah could follow. 3, 2, 1, now. The reinforced door slid open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing a narrow corridor that sloped upward. Warning lights flashed automatically as the security system registered the unauthorized access. Move, Jonah urged, and they rushed through the doorway. Once inside, Arya turned back to the control panel on the interior side, executing another series of commands. The door slid shut and locked with a solid thunk. A red security light above the door began to flash. Door sealed in emergency lockdown, she confirmed. It will take them time to override. The flooded shafts lived up to their name. The corridor they entered was damp, with water continuously seeping through small drainage channels in the floor. The walls were reinforced with pressure-resistant materials, designed to withstand the enormous force of the ocean pressing against Abyssus's outer hull. The shaft narrows ahead, Arya warned, consulting her holographic map. We'll need to use the maintenance crawlways to reach Level 3. They moved upward through the sloping corridor until they reached a section where the main shaft was blocked by a massive pressure regulation valve. A small access panel to the side opened to reveal a cramped crawlway, barely large enough for a person. That's our path? Jonah asked skeptically. Unless you can walk through solid metal, Arya replied, already removing her backpack to push it ahead of her into the crawlway. The space was claustrophobic, forcing them to crawl on hands and knees through standing water that grew deeper as they progressed. The metal walls pressed in from all sides, cold and unyielding. After what felt like an eternity of crawling through the cramped space, they emerged into a larger vertical shaft with ladder rungs embedded in the wall. Above them, faint light filtered down from multiple levels. We climb from here, Arya said, checking her map. 300 meters up to reach Level 3. They began the ascent, muscles burning from the exertion. The ladder rungs were slippery with condensation, making each step treacherous. A fall from this height would be fatal. Halfway up, a deep, resonating alarm began to sound throughout the shaft. What's that? Jonah called, pausing his climb. Arya's face paled behind her mask. Pressure warning. The shaft is scheduled for a routine flush, but that's not supposed to happen for another 48 hours. They're flooding it deliberately, Jonah realized. They know we're in here. We need to move faster, if the water reaches us before we get to Level 3 access. She didn't need to finish the thought. They would be drowned by the incoming seawater, their bodies washed into the collection tanks at the bottom of the shaft. They climbed with renewed urgency, ignoring burning muscles and scraped hands. Below them, a distant roar began to grow louder, the sound of thousands of liters of water rushing through the pressure release valves. "There!" Arya pointed upward. "Level 3 access hatch, 50 meters up!" The water was rising faster than they could climb, the temperature dropping rapidly as cold seawater filled the shaft. When they were still 20 meters from the access hatch, the rising water reached their feet. "Keep climbing!" Jonah shouted over the roar of the flood. The frigid water climbed rapidly, reaching their waists, then their chests. Arya reached the hatch first, bracing herself against the ladder with one hand while she worked the locking mechanism with the other. The circular hatch was designed to remain sealed during flood procedures, protecting the upper levels from inundation. "It's locked," she called down to Jonah, who was now neck-deep in the rising water. "Emergency override protocol!" Jonah looked down at the water swirling around him, then up at the hatch. They had seconds, not minutes. "Move aside!" he shouted. When Arya shifted to the side of the hatch, Jonah activated his molecular shifter gene to its maximum capacity. His body seemed to blur and distort, the boundaries between solid matter becoming temporarily flexible. He pushed upward through the narrow gap between the hatch and its frame, his altered molecular structure allowing him to squeeze through a space that should have been impossible to navigate. The process was agonizing, like forcing himself through a mesh of razor wire, but he made it through. Once on the other side, he immediately deactivated his shifting ability and grabbed the emergency release lever, wrenching it downward with all his strength. The hatch swung open just as the water reached Arya's chin. Jonah reached down, grabbed her arm, and pulled her through the opening. They collapsed on the metal floor of Level 3's maintenance sector, gasping and shivering as water poured through the open hatch behind them. Arya stared at him in shock. "How did you—" "Later," Jonah interrupted, struggling to his feet. "We need to seal this hatch before the whole level floods." Together, they forced the hatch closed against the pressure of the rising water, then engaged the emergency locks. The sound of rushing water became muffled, but didn't disappear entirely, evidence of the imperfect seal. "That won't hold for long," Jonah said, still breathing heavily. "They'll realize we survived and send security teams to this exit point." Arya nodded, removing her mask to wipe water from her face. "Then we keep moving. We're on Level 3 now, just 2 more to go." They took a moment to assess their condition. Both were soaked and chilled to the bone, their equipment waterlogged. Jonah's molecular shifting had drained him severely. He would need time to recover before using it again. "The sample containers?" he asked. Arya checked the secure pouches at her belt. "Intact. The seals held." "Good. Now we need to find somewhere to dry off and warm up before hypothermia sets in." Level 3 housed Abyssis's administrative offices and middle-class residential zones. The maintenance sector connected to a storage area for environmental system, rarely used, and likely to be unoccupied. They made their way through the storage area, finding a small equipment room with an active heating vent. The warm air was a blessing after the freezing floodwaters. "We can't stay long," Arya warned as they huddled near the vent. "The security response will be coordinated now. They know we survived the flooding and exactly where we emerged." 10 minutes, Jonah insisted. "We need to be functional to continue, and right now we're both at risk of hypothermia." Arya didn't argue. She removed her outer layer of clothing, wringing water from the fabric before hanging it near the vent to dry. Jonah did the same, then examined his equipment for damage. His recording device had survived, protected by a waterproof case. The weapons he carried, a shock baton and utility knife, were likewise undamaged. Their communication devices, however, had shorted out in the flood. "We're on our own now," he noted, showing Arya his fried communicator. "No way to coordinate if we're separated." "Then we don't get separated," she replied simply. As they recovered some warmth, Jonah studied Arya more carefully. without her mask. She looked younger than he'd expected, though the network of scars at her temple and the hardness in her eyes spoke of difficult experiences. "You never explained how you became involved in this," he said, "beyond having family on level 9. Arya was silent for a moment, her expression guarded. "My younger sister was taken for medical trials last year. Volunteers from level 9, they called them. Promised treatment for chronic radiation sickness and payment that could lift a family out of poverty. Aqua Vitae trials," Jonah guessed. She nodded. "I didn't know that then. By the time I hacked into the research database and discovered what was happening, my sister was already gone. She was in the first test group, 80% mortality rate." "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be angry," she said, her voice hardening. "The Ocean Lords and Level 1 officials treat us like lab rats. Disposable. They've been running these experiments for years, perfecting their control methods on the desperate and powerless." "And the Ethics Tribunal did nothing?" "The tribunal doesn't know, or claims not to know. All the research is classified under national security protocols. That's why we need to present the evidence directly, publicly, where they can't ignore it or bury it." Jonah understood her motivation now. This wasn't just about preventing a future atrocity, it was about justice for those already sacrificed. 10 minutes are up," he said, checking his partially dried clothing. "We need to move before security locks down this entire sector." They dressed quickly and continued their journey, now on level 3 where security was significantly tighter than the lower levels. Cameras monitored every major corridor, and identity checkpoints were established at regular intervals. "The transition to level 2 is ahead," Arya said, consulting her map. "Heavy security and biometric scanning. We can't bypass it through maintenance tunnels. They've eliminated those vulnerabilities." "Then we need a diversion," Jonah decided. "Something to draw attention away from the checkpoint long enough for us to slip through." "I have an idea," Arya said, leading him toward an environmental control station. "These stations regulate air quality and temperature for the entire level. If we trigger an atmospheric contamination alert, they'd initiate emergency protocols." Jonah finished, seeing her plan. "Checkpoint guards would be required to respond." "Exactly. And in the confusion, we might have a chance to slip through." Using her hacking tools, Arya accessed the environmental control system. She didn't trigger an actual contamination, which would have endangered innocent residents, but instead created a false reading in the monitoring systems. Alarms blared throughout the level, and announcement systems instructed residents to remain in their dwellings while environmental teams investigated. As predicted, the security personnel at the checkpoint divided their attention, with several moving to assist with the emergency response. "Now," Arya whispered, and they moved toward the checkpoint. The remaining guards were distracted, more concerned with the potential environmental threat than with checking identities thoroughly. Jonah and Arya presented their stolen maintenance worker credentials, keeping their heads down and postures submissive. For a moment, it seemed they would pass through unchallenged. Then, one of the guards frowned, looking more closely at his scanner. "Wait a minute," he said. "This ID is registering anomalies. Step aside for additional screening." Jonah tensed, preparing to activate his molecular shifter despite his weakened state. Before he could act, Arya spoke up. "Sir, we've been called to assist with the environmental alert on level 2. Engineering sent us specifically because of our experience with similar incidents on level 4. The guard hesitated, clearly torn between protocol and the urgency of the situation. Another alarm sounded, this one indicating the contamination was spreading. "Fine," he decided, "but report directly to engineering control on arrival. They'll verify your credentials." They passed through the checkpoint, maintaining their calm facade until they were well out of sight. Then Arya pulled Jonah into a service corridor. "That was too close," she breathed. "The biometric system flagged us, but the guard was too distracted to process it properly." "We won't get that lucky again," Jonah warned. Level 2 security will be even tighter, and they'll be specifically watching for maintenance workers responding to the false alert. Then we need to change tactics, Arya decided, and identities. Level 2 housed Abyssos's elite security forces, judicial offices, and the wealthiest citizens outside of Level 1. The architecture reflected the status-clean lines, premium materials, and abundant space compared to the cramped conditions of lower levels. Arya led them to a residential section, where they observed the patterns of residents coming and going. Unlike the lower levels, Level 2 citizens had personal security systems, private transportation, and individual style that set them apart from the utilitarian existence below. There, Arya pointed discreetly toward a young couple entering a residential complex. Mid-level judiciary aides, based on their insignia. They'll have access to Level 1 for court proceedings. You want to impersonate judiciary staff? Jonah asked skeptically. The biometric scanners can be fooled with the right equipment, Arya finished, producing a small device from her pack. Neural pattern disruptor. It creates a field that confuses biometric systems just enough to accept alternate data inputs. And where did you get something like that? I built it, she replied simply. After my sister was taken, I knew I'd eventually need to access the upper levels. I've been preparing for a long time. Shade. They waited until the couple disappeared into the building, then approached a service entrance. Arya's hacking tools made short work of the security lock, giving them access to the building's maintenance systems. Within the complex, they located a laundry facility where residents' clothing was processed. They selected appropriate attire for judiciary aides formal, conservative garments that would allow them to blend with Level 2's professional class. The neural disruptor has limited power, Arya explained, as they changed. Maybe enough for 2 or 3 scans before it fails. We'll need to make each one count. Properly attired. They looked like typical Level 2 professionals, a stark contrast to their previous appearance as maintenance workers. Jonah felt exposed without his customary dark clothing, but recognized the necessity of adaptation. They exited the residential complex through the main entrance, adopting the confident posture and brisk pace of people with purpose and authority. No one gave them a second glance in the stratified society of Abyssos. People saw what they expected to see, and 2 well-dressed individuals on Level 2 were entirely unremarkable. The central judicial complex dominated Level 2, a massive structure of gleaming metal and transparent polymer that housed the courts, legal offices, and administrative centers for Abyssos's justice system. It also contained the only civilian access point to Level 1. The main entrance will have the highest security, Jonah observed as they surveyed the building from a public observation platform. Multiple checkpoints, armed guards, and redundant scanning systems. We're not using the main entrance, Arya replied. There's a secondary access point for judiciary staff on the eastern side. Security is still present, but not as intensive. They approached the staff entrance, Arya activating the neural disruptor as they neared the first security checkpoint. The device emitted no visible sign of operation, but Jonah could feel a subtle tingling at the base of his skull in effect of the neural interference. The security guard at the entrance barely glanced at their judiciary credentials, more focused on the steady stream of staff entering for the day's proceedings. The first biometric scanner, retinal identification system, paused momentarily when Jonah looked into it, then flashed green for approval. Don't look relieved, Arya murmured as they passed the first checkpoint. Level 2 judiciary staff are never relieved to be at work. Jonah adjusted his expression to one of mild contempt and attitude he'd observed in the higher-level citizens, who occasionally ventured to the lower levels for entertainment or illicit activities. They proceeded through the judicial complex, navigating the labyrinthine corridors with the help of public directory displays. Their destination was the elevator bank that provided access to Level 1 used exclusively by high-ranking judicial officials and those summoned to appear before the ethics tribunal. As they approached the elevators, A final security checkpoint loomed. This one was more substantial. Armed guards flanked a full-body scanner, and a senior security officer checked credentials personally. "The neural disruptor won't fool that scanner," Jonah whispered. "It's military grade." "We need another way," Arya agreed, surveying their surroundings. "There." She nodded toward an emergency stairwell access point, marked with a symbol for maintenance and security personnel only. "It will be alarmed," Jonah warned. "Yes, but it connects directly to level 1. If we move quickly enough after triggering the alarm, we might reach the tribunal before security responds." It was a desperate plan, but they were running out of options and time. News of their progress through the levels would have reached the Ocean Lords and Judge Vega by now. Every minute increased the risk of capture. They waited until the security team was distracted by a large group of judicial staff, arriving simultaneously. Then slipped to the emergency stairwell door. Arya disabled the first layer of security using her hacking device. But as predicted, an alarm would still trigger when the door opened. "Ready?" she asked, hand poised above the door release. Jonah nodded, mentally preparing himself. Once that alarm sounded, they would have minutes at most before security forces converged on their location. Arya pressed the release, and the door slid open. Immediately, a shrill alarm echoed through the corridor. They darted through the doorway and began climbing the stairs as rapidly as possible. The stairwell was utilitarian and steep, designed for emergency use rather than comfort. Above them, Level 1 awaited the pinnacle of Abyssus, home to the city's ruling elite and the ethics tribunal they sought. Behind them, they could hear security teams mobilizing, voices shouting orders as the alarm continued to blare. The neural disruptor had failed on the final scanner, alerting security to unauthorized access attempts. "They're coming," Jonah warned as they climbed. "We need to reach level 1 before they seal the access points." They pushed harder, muscles burning from the exertion. After what seemed an eternity, they reached a heavy door marked Level 1, Authorized Personnel Only. Arya immediately connected her hacking device to the security panel, but cursed in frustration. "This is a different system, quantum encrypted. I can't bypass it quickly." Jonah assessed their situation. Security teams were closing in from below. The door before them was impenetrable by conventional means, and his molecular shifter ability was still recovering from its earlier use. "Stand back," he instructed, placing his hands on the door seam. "I need to try something." Arya moved aside, watching as Jonah closed his eyes in concentration. His outline began to blur slightly, not the full molecular shifting he was capable of, but a partial activation. He pressed against the door, focusing his ability on the locking mechanism. With excruciating effort, he manipulated his molecular structure to extend tendrils into the locking system. It wasn't like passing through the flood control hatch. This was precision work, delicate and agonizing. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he worked, manipulating internal components he could feel, but not see. A click sounded from within the door, then another. The locking mechanism disengaged, and the door slid open a fraction. Jonah stumbled backward, exhausted from the effort. His vision swam, and he would have fallen if Arya hadn't caught him. "How did you?" she began. "No time," he gasped. "Go." They slipped through the partially open door, just as security forces rounded the final turn in the stairwell below. Arya helped Jonah through, then sealed the door behind them, using her hacking device to trigger a security lockdown, ironically, protecting them with the very systems designed to keep them out. They had reached level 1, but Jonah was severely weakened. The molecular manipulation had drained his remaining energy reserves, leaving him barely able to stand. "I need time," he managed, leaning heavily against a wall. "Can't continue like this." Arya looked around urgently. They were in a service corridor, likely used by maintenance staff to access Level 1's infrastructure without disturbing the elite residents. It was temporarily secure, but that wouldn't last. "We need to find somewhere to recover," she decided, supporting Jonah as they moved deeper into the corridor. And fast. This level will go into complete lockdown once they realize we've breached it. They found a utility closet containing environmental control equipment. It was cramped but secure, with no surveillance devices inside. Arya helped Jonah sit against the wall, then checked his condition more thoroughly. "Your temperature is dropping," she observed with concern. "Side effect of the molecular shifting." Jonah nodded weakly. "Energy depletion. Cells need time to stabilize." Arya removed her jacket and placed it around his shoulders, then produced a small, silver packet from her bag. Emergency ration. High calorie, designed for biologically enhanced operatives. It might help. The nutrient paste was tasteless, but effective. Within minutes, Jonah felt strength returning to his limbs, though he remained far from full capacity. "The Ethics Tribunal," he said, his voice stronger. "Where is it located?" Arya consulted her holographic map. "Central Administrative District, about half a kilometer from our position. The tribunal is in session today, public proceedings regarding resource allocation. Then, Judge Vega will be there." Jonah realized. "Along with the other members of the tribunal." "Exactly. Our opportunity to present the evidence before the entire governing body, with public witnesses present." The plan was sound, but execution would be challenging. Level 1 security would be searching for them now, and Judge Vega would have been alerted to their presence. They needed to reach the tribunal chamber quickly, before security protocols could remove them from the level. "I need another 10 minutes, Jonah estimated, feeling his cellular structure gradually stabilizing. "Then we move." While they waited, Arya prepared their evidence, the data chip containing research files, and the secured sample of aqua vitae. She also produced a small broadcasting device. "In case we can't reach the tribunal directly," she explained. "This will hijack the public announcement systems on Level 1, limited range, but enough to broadcast key evidence to everyone in the administrative district." Jonah's respect for her preparation deepened. "You really have been planning this for a long time." "Since I lost my sister," Arya confirmed. "But planning and doing are different things. I couldn't have gotten this far without you." After allowing Jonah sufficient recovery time, they prepared to leave their temporary sanctuary. The judiciary disguises were still effective, though somewhat disheveled from their journey. They straightened their clothing as best they could, attempting to restore their appearance as Level 1 professionals. "One last thing," Arya said, reaching into her pack. She removed a small device and attached it to Jonah's wrist. "Emergency transponder. If we're separated, activate it. I'll find you." "And if you're captured?" he asked. "Then complete the mission," she replied simply. "The evidence reaches the tribunal, no matter what." They exited the utility closet cautiously, checking for security patrols before moving into the main corridors of Level 1. The contrast with the lower levels was stark, spacious hallways, premium materials, and abundant natural light from transparent ceiling panels that offered views of the ocean above. Level 1, citizens moved about their business, unaware of the intruders in their midst or the corruption within their leadership. They had the prosperous, healthy appearance of people who had never known true hardship, stark contrast to the residents of Levels 8 and 9, who struggled daily for basic necessities. Jonah and Arya adopted the purposeful stride of people with official business, navigating through the administrative district toward the ethics tribunal chambers. Public directory displays guided their path, showing them to be less than 5 minutes from their destination. "Security checkpoint ahead," Jonah murmured, nodding toward the entrance to the government complex that housed the tribunal. 4 guards, body scanners, credential verification. "Too many to bypass," Arya agreed. "We need another approach." They observed the checkpoint from a public seating area, noting the patterns of who was allowed entry. Citizens with official business, judiciary staff, and tribunal witnesses all passed through with varying levels of scrutiny. "There," Jonah pointed discreetly, The public gallery entrance. Less security because spectators are confined to the observation area. They'll still scan for weapons and unauthorized technology, Arya noted, and check basic identification. Can your neural disruptor handle one more scan? Arya checked the device. Barely. Maybe one more use before it fails completely. Then, we use it to get into the public gallery, Jonah decided. From there, we can assess how to reach the tribunal floor. They approached the public entrance, joining a small group of citizens, waiting to observe the day's proceedings. The security here was indeed less intense, a basic identity verification, and a scan for prohibited items. Arya activated the neural disruptor as they reached the checkpoint. The guard barely glanced at their judiciary credentials before waving them through. The scanner hummed as they passed through, but registered no alerts. Inside, they followed the crowd to the public observation gallery, a tiered seating area overlooking the tribunal chamber. Below, the ethics tribunal was already in session. 9 members sat at an elevated semicircular table, facing presenters who stood at a central podium. Jonah immediately recognized Judge Coral Vega, presiding over the session from the central position. Her severe features and piercing gaze commanded attention as she questioned a resource administrator about water allocation protocols. "There she is," Arya whispered. "And look who else is present." She nodded toward a side entrance, where Lauren Ebern of the Leviathan Collective stood conversing with several Level 1 officials. His bioluminescent tattoos were subdued, but still visible beneath his formal attire. "Ocean lords at a tribunal session," Jonah observed. "Unusual." "Not if they're expecting trouble," Arya replied. "They know we're coming. They're waiting for us." The realization changed everything. If Vega and Ebern were prepared for their arrival, direct confrontation would be suicidal. They needed a new approach. Jonah surveyed the chamber, noting the security positions, exits, and most importantly, the central podium where speakers addressed the tribunal. Above the chamber, a massive transparent dome revealed the ocean above, a reminder of Abyssus's precarious existence beneath the waves. "The broadcasting system," he said, indicating the control panel near the presenter's podium. "If we can access it, we could transmit the evidence to every display in the chamber simultaneously." "Security is too tight to reach it directly," Arya noted. "We'd be stopped before we got halfway." Jonah studied the proceedings more carefully. "The current session is about to conclude. There will be a brief recess before the next case. During the transition, there's less focus on the podium." "Still not enough time to reach it and upload the data," Arya countered. "Unless—" Her eyes widened as an idea formed. "A distraction. Something significant enough to draw all attention away from the podium." Jonah followed her gaze to the environmental control panel near their position in the gallery. It regulated the chamber's atmosphere, lighting, and most importantly, the transparent dome's opacity settings. "If we trigger an environmental alert," Arya continued, "security protocols would initiate automatically. All eyes would turn to the emergency systems, while one of us reaches the podium and uploads the data." Jonah finished. "It could work, but we'd have seconds at most." "I'll handle the environmental systems," Arya decided. "You take the data chip and reach the podium. Your molecular shifting gives you a better chance of moving undetected during the confusion." The plan was risky, but feasible. Jonah's ability had recovered enough for a brief activation, not enough to become fully invisible, but sufficient to blur his outline and avoid immediate detection if attention was directed elsewhere. "Wait for my signal," Arya instructed, moving casually toward the environmental control panel. "When the lights flicker, make your move." Jonah positioned himself near the stairs leading down to the tribunal floor, the data chip secure in his hand. He watched as Arya reached the control panel and surreptitiously connected her hacking device. Below, Judge Vega was concluding the current case. "The tribunal finds the water allocation proposal acceptable, with modifications as noted. We will reconvene in 15 minutes to address the next matter." As the tribunal members began to rise, the chamber's lights suddenly flickered, then dimmed completely. The transparent dome above began to darken rapidly, casting the chamber into shadow. Alarm tones sounded, and the environmental status displays flashed warning messages. In the ensuing confusion, Jonah activated his molecular shifter gene, blurring his outline as he moved swiftly down the stairs toward the central podium. Security personnel were focused on the environmental systems and protecting the tribunal members, creating the opening they needed. Reaching the podium, Jonah inserted the data chip into the presentation system. He initiated the upload sequence, directing the system to broadcast to all displays throughout the chamber. The process would take approximately 30 seconds to complete. Security was already responding to the disruption, with guards moving to secure the chamber exits and investigate the environmental control malfunction. Jonah maintained his position at the podium, using his molecular shifting to remain partially concealed in the dim lighting. 20 seconds to completion. The upload progress bar crept forward on the podium's small control screen. 15 seconds. Judge Vega had noticed something amiss at the podium, her eyes narrowing as she peered through the dimness. 10 seconds. A security officer was moving toward the podium, hand on his weapon. 5 seconds. Jonah's molecular shifting was failing, his outline becoming more distinct as his energy reserves depleted. Upload complete. Suddenly, every display in the chamber illuminated with the contents of the data chip. Research files, test subject data, mortality rates, and the true purpose of aqua vitamine control and planned obsolescence for the lower-level, populational, projected in stark detail for the entire tribunal and audience to see. The chamber erupted in chaos. Citizens in the gallery gasped and shouted. Tribunal members rose from their seats in alarm. Judge Vega's face contorted with rage and fear as she recognized the exposed information. Lauren Ebern was already moving, signaling to a security team. Guards throughout the chamber drew weapons, some moving to secure exits, while others converged on the podium where Jonah stood. "Citizens of Abyssus," Jonah called out, his voice amplified by the podium's audio system. "This is the truth your leaders have hidden. Aqua Vitae is not a medical breakthrough. It's a weapon designed to control and ultimately kill the residents of the lower levels." Security officers reached him, attempting to drag him away from the podium. Jonah resisted, continuing to speak as the evidence displayed around them. Judge Vega and the Ocean Lords have conspired to develop a neural control agent that causes death within weeks of administration. They've been testing it on citizens from level 9, with an 80% mortality rate. The guards wrestled him away from the microphone, but the damage was done. The evidence was displayed for all to see, and the public broadcasting system had carried his words throughout level 1. Judge Vega stood, attempting to regain control of the situation. "This is a fabrication. Security, arrest this man immediately and shut down those displays." But it was too late. The data was being downloaded by citizens, journalists, and even some tribunal members. The truth was spreading beyond their ability to contain it. As security forces subdued Jonah, a commotion erupted at the side entrance. Arya was being dragged into the chamber by Lauren Ebern's personal guards, her mask removed and her arms restrained. "We found the accomplice tampering with environmental systems," one guard reported to Ebern. "She had this." He held up the container with the aqua vitae sample, its blue contents glowing ominously in the dim light. Ebern smiled coldly. "Excellent. Now we have both intruders and can dispose of this unfortunate misunderstanding." "There will be no disposal." A voice rang out from the tribunal table. Tribunal member Alara Chen, known for her incorruptible principles, had stood and was examining the evidence displays with horror. "This data appears authentic. The research protocols, subject identifiers, and molecular structures all align with legitimate scientific methodology." "This is not the proper forum for such accusations," Vega insisted. "This matter should be addressed in a closed session, with proper verification. No more closed sessions, Chen interrupted. No more secrets. If this evidence is authentic, you and the Ocean Lords have committed crimes against humanity. The entire population deserves to know the truth. Other tribunal members began to voice agreement, their expressions reflecting shock and outrage at the revealed information. The balance was shifting, public opinion turning against Vega and Ebern as the full extent of the Aqua Vitae program became clear. Lauren Ebern, realizing the situation was spiraling beyond his control, signaled to his personal security team. In an instant, they drew advanced weapons illegal in Abyssus and aimed them at the tribunal members. "This farce has gone on long enough," Ebern growled, his bioluminescent tattoos pulsing with angry red light. "No one leaves this chamber until those displays are shut down and these terrorists are in custody." It was a desperate move, attempting to intimidate the tribunal into submission. But the public broadcast had already spread throughout Level 1, and citizens were reacting with outrage. Outside the chamber, a crowd was gathering, demanding answers. Judge Vega looked panicked, her carefully crafted public persona crumbling. "Lauren, stand down! This is madness. You can't threaten the ethics tribunal." "Don't lecture me about madness, Coral," Ebern spat. "You were as deep in this as any of us. Your signature authorized the Level 9 testing protocols." The revelation caused another wave of shock to ripple through the chamber. Judge Vega, who had built her reputation on fairness and ethical governance, was directly implicated in the atrocities. Jonah, still restrained by security officers, caught Arya's eye across the chamber. Despite their captivity, a small smile of triumph passed between them. The truth was out, beyond the ability of Vega or the Ocean Lords to suppress. But their victory came at a cost. Ebern was clearly willing to escalate to violence rather than face justice. His armed men created a standoff, with the tribunal members effectively hostages. "Release them!" A commanding voice echoed through the chamber. All eyes turned to the entrance, where a contingent of Level 1 security forces had arrived, weapons drawn and aimed at Ebern's men. Leading them was tribunal member Chen, who had slipped away during the initial confusion. "This chamber is now under the direct authority of the Ethics Tribunal," Chen announced. "Lauren Ebern, you are ordered to disarm and surrender." Ebern laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the suddenly silent room. "And if I refuse, are you willing to risk a firefight in this chamber? One stray shot could breach the dome, and we all know what happens then." He gestured upward to the transparent ceiling, where the weight of the ocean pressed against the reinforced material. A breach would be catastrophic, potentially flooding the entire level. It was a tense standoff, with neither side willing to back down. Jonah knew that regardless of how this confrontation ended, their mission had succeeded. The evidence was public. But success meant little if they didn't survive to see justice served. In that moment of impasse, movement caught Jonah's eye. Silas Crow, the assassin from the Ethereal Syndicate, had entered silently through a service door. Unlike Ebern's men, he carried no visible weapons, but his presence was perhaps more threatening because of it. The scythe moved with predatory grace, positioning himself behind the tribunal members. Jonah tried to warn them, but the guards restraining him tightened their grip, silencing his attempt. He watched helplessly as Crow approached, knowing the assassin's capabilities all too well. But something unexpected happened. Instead of attacking the tribunal members, Crow moved swiftly toward Ebern, a thin black blade appearing in his hand as if by magic. "Marius sends his regards," Crow whispered, just loud enough to be heard, referring to the leader of the Ethereal Syndicate. Before Ebern could react, the blade pressed against his throat. His security team hesitated, caught by surprise at this betrayal from within the ranks of the Ocean Lords. "The Ethereal Syndicate disavows all connection to Aqua Vitae," Crow announced to the chamber. "Marius Blackwell had no knowledge of the true nature of this compound or its testing on citizens. It was a lie. Of course, a calculated move to distance the ethereal syndicate from the fallout, but it created the opening needed to resolve the standoff. With their leader compromised, Ebern's security team lowered their weapons. Level 1 forces moved in quickly, securing the armed men and taking control of the chamber. Judge Vega made no attempt to resist as security officers approached her. Her expression was one of resignation, a woman who knew her carefully constructed world had collapsed entirely. Crow disappeared in the confusion, slipping away as silently as he had arrived. The Ocean Lords' alliance had fractured, with the ethereal syndicate sacrificing Leviathan Collective to save themselves from justice. As order was restored to the chamber, the guards restraining Jonah and Arya were instructed to release them. Tribunal member Chen approached, her expression grave but respectful. "Your evidence will be examined thoroughly," she assured them. "If verified and initial analysis suggests it will be, those responsible will face justice for their crimes." "The people of Level 9 who were used as test subjects," Arya said urgently. "Many are still suffering. They need immediate medical attention." "Medical teams are being dispatched to the lower levels as we speak," Chen replied. "We've already begun emergency protocols based on the information you provided." It was more than they had dared hope for. Not just exposure of the truth, but immediate action to help those affected. "What happens now?" Jonah asked, still wary despite their apparent victory. "You two have taken an enormous risk to bring this evidence forward," Chen acknowledged. "The tribunal recognizes your service to Abyssus, but your methods were unorthodox. There will need to be a formal hearing regarding your unauthorized access to restricted areas." It was a diplomatic way of saying they might still face consequences for their actions, despite the righteousness of their cause. "However," Chen continued, "given the extraordinary circumstances and the lives you've potentially saved, I believe leniency will be strongly recommended." It wasn't a guarantee, but it was something, more than Jonah had expected when they began this journey. "There's one more thing," Arya said, producing the container with the aquavitae sample. "This needs to be secured and studied, not to weaponize it, but to develop countermeasures and potentially treatments for those already affected." Chen nodded, carefully accepting the container. "It will be handled with appropriate protocols. The sub-healing center on Level 8 will be granted emergency funding to treat victims." As they were escorted from the chamber, Jonah and Arya found themselves in the midst of a gathering crowd. News had spread rapidly through Level 1, and citizens were demanding answers about the corruption revealed in their leadership. "We should disappear while we can," Jonah murmured to Arya, "before someone decides we're more useful as scapegoats than heroes." Arya nodded in agreement. "I know a safe route back to the lower levels. Once the initial chaos settles, we'll have a better idea of how this plays out." They slipped away from their escort during a moment of confusion, using Arya's knowledge of the environmental systems to access maintenance corridors that would lead them back toward the lower levels. The journey down was considerably easier than the journey up had been. With the city in turmoil and security forces focused on the unfolding scandal, the normal checkpoints were either abandoned or operating with minimal scrutiny. 3 hours later, they reached Level 8, exhausted but triumphant. They found temporary shelter in one of Arya's safe houses, a converted storage unit, similar to Jonah's own hiding place. "We did it," Arya said quietly as they monitored public information channels, showing the aftermath of their revelation. "Vega and Abern are in custody. The Ethics Tribunal has launched a full investigation. Medical teams are being sent to Level 9. "And the Ocean Lords?" Jonah asked. "Fractured. Ethereal Syndicate is claiming ignorance and cooperation. Leviathan Collective is being dismantled. Abyssal Cartel is going underground. But they're being hunted." It was more than they could have hoped for. Yet Jonah remained cautious. Systems of power didn't collapse overnight, even when their corruption was exposed. There would be resistance, attempts to re-establish control, perhaps even retaliation against those who had revealed the truth. "What will you do now?" he asked Arya. She removed her mask, setting it aside with a finality that suggested she might not use it again. "Help rebuild. The sub-healing center on level 8 will need support treating the victims, and someone needs to ensure the new leadership doesn't repeat the mistakes of the old." "You're staying visible, then," Jonah observed. "No more shadows." "Some fights can't be won from the dark," she replied. "What about you? Will the shade return to the shadows?" Jonah considered the question. For years, his survival had depended on remaining unseen, unknown. But something had changed during their journey to level 1, perhaps, in the moment he chose to reveal himself to help Arya, or when he spoke to the entire chamber about the truth of Aquavitae. Not entirely, he decided. There's still value in being the one no one sees coming, but perhaps the shade can serve a different purpose now. 3 months later, Jonah sat at the back of another chamber, this one the Forum of Justice, where the newly restructured governance of Abyssus was being formalized. The former system of levels and stratification was being replaced with a more equitable model, with representation from all sectors of the city. Arya stood at the podium, presenting a comprehensive plan for the reconstruction of Abyssus initiative. Her position as the new Symphony of the Community, an ironic adaptation of her hacker alias, gave her the authority to coordinate information flow between citizens and governance. The sub-healing center on level 8 had been expanded into a full medical facility, treating not only the victims of Aquavitae, but providing care to the formerly neglected residents of the lower levels. Research continued on creating an antidote for those still suffering from the compound's effects. Judge Vega and Lauren Aburn had been tried and stripped of their positions, their crimes publicly documented in the Abyssus justiciary records to ensure future generations would remember the dangers of unchecked power. The Ocean Lord's influence had diminished significantly, though Jonah harbored no illusions that corruption had been eliminated entirely. New powers would eventually emerge, and the cycle might begin again unless someone remained vigilant. That would be his role now. Not as a revolutionary or public figure like Arya had become, but as the Watcher in the shadows, the one who moved unseen, gathering information and exposing threats before they could take root. As Arya concluded her presentation to enthusiastic support, she glanced toward the back of the room, meeting Jonah's eyes briefly. A subtle nod passed between them, acknowledgement of what they had accomplished together and what still remained to be done. Jonah rose silently, slipping out through a side door as the assembly continued. Behind him, he heard a citizen commenting to another, "They say if you don't know who the most powerful person in the room is, then it's the one nobody notices." Jonah smiled to himself as he disappeared into the corridor. Some legends were worth preserving, especially when they served a greater purpose. The Shade would continue to watch over Abyssus, a guardian no one would see until the moment his presence was most needed. In a world rebuilt from catastrophe, sometimes the greatest power lay not in controlling others, but in remaining free to act when others could not. Jonah had found his purpose at last, not hiding from the world, but protecting it from the shadows. And if someday the corruption returned, if new threats emerged to endanger the people of Abyssus, the Shade would be there, the lone human in the back of the room, the one everyone feared. Because when he finally stepped forward, it meant change was coming. Whether from darkness or light, justice would always find a way.